Good morning. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Patty Horvatich, and I'm the Vice President of Business Investment for the Pittsburgh Regional Alliance, the economic development affiliate of the Allegheny Conference. And as your host, I'd like to welcome everyone to the latest installment of the conference's Response and Recovery webinar series. I'd like to first thank our sponsors for their generous support for making programs like these possible. Peoples, Giant Eagle, Highmark Health, and UPMC Health Plan. I'd also like to thank the Allegheny Conference's Regional Investor Council members who provide the time, talent, and resources to support all of our efforts. Today's webinar is Practical Considerations for Preparing the Region's Workplaces for the Workforce. This topic is part of a broader conversation in the community at large about how to responsibly reopen our economy and keep it open in a safe and sustainable manner. Helping to inform that conversation is Ready Pittsburgh, a newly launched digital resource from the Allegheny Conference and its affiliate, the Pittsburgh Regional Alliance. On that site, we've curated some of the most exemplary plans and guidance from industry, state government, OSHA, CDC, among others, for reopening and staying open. Our program this morning aims to provide a deeper dive into the responsibilities and practicalities associated with readying several different types of workplaces, office, industrial, and retail, for employees, clients, and customers. You'll be hearing about some best practices to increase confidence. While these are rather unprecedented responsibilities, the way to compliance, safety, and success doesn't have to be beyond what's possible. We're featuring a guest moderator today, a man who needs little to no introduction, Don Smith, President of the Regional Industrial Development Corporation, RIDC. In addition to Don, we have 3 panelists lined up to offer insight into what's unique to their industry, as well as what's common ground for all. These include Amanda Schaub, Executive Director of the Building Owners and Managers Association, BOMA Pittsburgh. Petra Mitchell, President and CEO of Catalyst Connection. And Jason Cannon, First Vice President at CBRE. So without further delay, let's grab our coffee cups, sit back, and welcome Don Smith and our panelists.
Good morning, Patty, and I'll ask the panelists to go ahead and queue up their video and audio so we can get started. Welcome, everyone, and good morning. We have a very timely topic, I think, for today's webinar, and we have some great panelists, so I'm really excited to have some friends here to share the stage, if you will, and really provide some insight from the office, industrial, and retail sectors. You know, it's an interesting time for all of us as we have gone from red to yellow, and we all hope on our way to green before too awful long. You know, we don't have our last pandemic experience to draw on, so it's kind of make it up as you go, and I think this is a great opportunity that the conference provides to share some insight from business leaders about what other people are doing and what some of the best and most practical plans are for reopening our workplaces safely. The question has really shifted from when will we be able to go back to how will we be able to go back? And that's a lot of what we're going to focus on today. So I'm going to start by asking each of our panelists just to give a quick introduction of themselves and their organization. And Amanda, I'm going to kick it off with you.
Thank you, Don and Patty, for the warm introduction and for the Allegheny Conference and Pittsburgh Regional Alliance for having us today. As Patty mentioned, I'm with the Building Owners and Managers Association of Pittsburgh, also known as BOMA Pittsburgh. And we help owners, managers, and commercial real estate professionals maintain safe, efficient properties through advocacy, networking, education, and then philanthropy within the community.
Thank you, Amanda. Petra.
Yes, good morning, everyone. Thank you, Don and Patty, as well. My name is Petra Mitchell. I'm the president and CEO of Catalyst Connection. Catalyst Connection is an economic development organization that focuses and serves on our region's small and medium-sized manufacturers. and we are part of a statewide network called the Pennsylvania Industrial Resource Center program, and also a national network called the Manufacturing Extension Partnership Program. And I just want to, just comment a couple highlights of what manufacturing in our community looks like. It is our 4th largest industry in southwestern Pennsylvania. It employs over 90,000 workers with 3,000 establishments. And many of you may be wondering what happened during the governor's shutdown orders. We believe that, based on the industry codes, 47% of the manufacturers were allowed to or may continue operations, and 53% were not, except for those that were in the defense industrial base or those that received waivers. And we believe that's probably 60 to 70% of the manufacturers, although limited production, limited staff, that many remained open. So we're happy to discuss that and talk some more about what happened during that period. Thank you.
Thanks, Petra. And last but certainly not least, Jason.
Good morning, folks, and thank you to the PRA and the Allegheny Conference. And Dawn, thanks for hosting today. My name is Jason Cannon. I'm with CBRE. We're a full-service commercial real estate firm, and I'll be talking about the retail world today. And my focus at CBRE is I'm a retail advisor or a retail broker, if you will, and I represent retail property owners and retailers across all service lines.
Great. Well, thank you, panelists. And, I'm happy to be coming to you from the global basement rec room headquarters of RIDC. Looking forward to getting back into the office. But there are a number of issues we have to deal with in order to get ourselves and our staff and our customers back into their offices. So I'm going to start with some questions for our panelists who can provide perspective from the office, industrial, and retail sectors on some of these questions. So first question, I'm going to start with Amanda. How are you or your clients preparing for reopening your spaces?
So yeah, the commercial real estate industry, the commercial properties, they never closed, as they had some tenants that were either considered essential or just keeping the building, operating and functioning itself. But it was really less than 10% occupancy, which, as you can imagine, is a bit spooky when you have a large high-rise building with, less than 10% of its usual population. So at this point, they're just preparing. There's been surveys sent out to most tenants by landlords, looking to see what the yellow phase looks like for those tenants. And we're expecting to see that number go to 20%, maybe 30%, which as we get, further into the discussion, that does help, with the new requirements per the governor's orders and CDC guidelines to really kind of slowly ramp up to full occupancy once we get back to green.
So not a tidal wave of folks rushing back into the office immediately.
Correct. So good.
Petra, what are your clients? You work with so many small and medium-sized manufacturers. What are they seeing or saying?
Yeah, as I mentioned, we do believe that the majority of manufacturers have remained open because, again, they're in critical supply chains for defense or medical device or similar sectors. However, it has been with limited production and limited staff. And some of the main issues that our manufacturers have faced, obviously PPE. Job one is to keep workers safe. And, every company is thinking about that. And believe it or not, face masks have been quite a challenge for manufacturers because, again, obviously we want to keep everyone safe, but there are times when face masks may impede job performance and or worker safety. And so those have been some issues that companies have had to deal with. And what's that trade-off between keeping ourselves safe from COVID infection versus safe from other production processes and so forth. Social distancing has definitely been a concern. Manufacturers have had to think about changing shifts, going from maybe one shift to 3, staggered shift times. Definitely office workers have been working from home so that the production workers can stay as safe as possible. Symptom checking has been quite an issue that's manufacturers have had to deal with. Sanitation, disinfection policies, and guest and visitor policies. I would say those have been the main topics of discussion and trying to figure out, what are the best practices in those cases.
Great, thank you. Jason, your clients have probably arguably been hit harder than anyone else. So what are you seeing in the retail sector in particular in terms of responding to moving to yellow and looking forward to green?
Yeah, we certainly have, Dawn. Our clients have had their challenges, and we've seen a lot of resilience. We've seen the best of so many of our clients throughout this pandemic, and it's so different for the difference. Retail is kind of a catch-all for so many different types of businesses. So you have small shop retailers in strip centers, you have restaurants, and you have shopping malls, and you have the tenants of each of those types of properties. And each type of facility has its own issues, has its own challenges. But we have seen, again, the best of so many of our clients that rather than living in the problem, they're living in the solution, and they're trying to figure out how to best move forward rather than dwell on where they are today with shutdowns and limited hours and limited opportunities to serve their clientele. And it's so different for a restaurant than it is for a 30,000 foot shop or clothing store, if you will. So we have helped our clients, and we've worked together with them and have created customized plans. We have there's not a catch-all by any means. We have customized plans depending on whether it's restaurant or soft goods or mall operations or strip centers. When you look a large format mall versus a large shopping center that's open air, they have different problems. They have different requirements going forward. So all of the things that we're seeing in our lives now with masks and sanitizers and different PPE, and we'll see health screenings going forward. Those are all things that our clients are using. We're helping to put them in plans in place for them, and our job has changed quite a bit. We're not just putting deals together right now. We're absolutely become in that advisory role for our clients to not put them into business, but to help get them back into business.
Great, thank you. One of the concerns that certainly comes up from landlords, from business owners and operators is this whole issue of liability. We've seen Congress try to deal with this and not yet successfully. But how are your teams, your tenants, your clients handling or thinking about the liability issues around reopening or bringing people into the workplace during the pandemic and being responsible for their safety? Petra, we'll start with you this time.
Yeah, well, it's definitely a concern. And like I said, just about, every company that we talk to, worker safety is their #1 priority. And I think it's just because the right thing to do, although, there's certainly some liability issues there as well. But again, worker safety, providing them with the PPE that they need, the social distancing, those have all been top of mind. And I think companies have come up with some really unique and innovative ways to, to address those kinds of things. I think some of the things that are on the minds now of manufacturers are testing, testing employees, testing workers as they bring more and more people back to ramp up production. Maintaining those social distancing is becoming more challenging. And so, they're not starting to think about some new ways and new things that they're going to have to do to address those issues. But yeah, manufacturers, business owners take it very seriously that they are responsible for helping to, for keeping their employees safe, and they're doing everything they can to make that happen.
Thank you. Jason, in the retail sector, any particular angle on liability concerns from the folks you work with?
The key is really just that we want people to feel safe and comfortable. I think consumer confidence takes on a whole new definition now. And, the consumer confidence has to be people are comfortable and confident in going back out into the public and back out into the shopping places, whether there's just the grocery store or the home improvement stores or malls or whatever it's going to be going forward. The key is that, the customer has to feel safe, the workforce has to feel safe, and the people that are running those facilities, it's been impressive to see how quickly people have been able to, put plans into place to make sure that that happens. And, from a liability standpoint, we just want to make sure everybody is safe as possible. So, we're trying to be safe, be smart, be prepared, and, make sure that there are no more surprises as the world goes on.
Thank you, Jason. And batting cleanup on this one, Amanda, your members really are facing this head on as you operate all the buildings that people are coming back into. What are you seeing from your members on the liability issue or their concerns about reopening?
Yeah, in the commercial real estate space, there's kind of that added layer of, there's an employer within a property and multiple employers within a, a multi-tenant space. So I feel as, BOMA's role, as an organization and similar to the landlords that, echoing Jason's, that we want people to feel comfortable in their workspace and, sharing the resources that are out there with their tenants and signage and, how to move throughout the building. So, collecting that information, landlords keeping their own employees safe and then sharing that information with tenants so they can keep their employees safe and the whole building safe as well.
Thank you. I know we're looking at when do we send our office staff back, and some of the issues that are looming large in our policy decisions are, how are we going to handle office cleaning? Are we going to do a day porter? Are we going to have it cleaned and disinfected every day? How much PPE of what type are we providing to employees? So what are you seeing in terms of people's plans for handling office cleaning and decontamination? Jason, we'll start with you.
Well, so again, my focus is retail. So I have a great sense of what CBRE is planning and what our vendors are planning for the office buildings. But from a retail standpoint, I'll go there first. Everybody's just paying much more attention. I think that, a lot of our clients, frankly, were diligent before and kept pretty clean places. But with an extra level now, when you go into a retailer now, the ones that you've been able to go into, there are notable differences. You can see there is sanitizer everywhere, and there's a screen between you, a plastic shield between you and the cashier. And, the restaurants that are open, you're not really going in. You're meeting people at a table at the front to grab your takeout. And, those are things that were quick fixes. I think there are going to be longer term permanent fixes that will have to be put in place, at least until there's a vaccine, I would suspect. But from a cleanliness standpoint, it's just going to be a diligence, and it's going to have to happen more often going forward than maybe it did. Where daily cleanings are going to become every 30-minute cleanings or every hour cleanings. And, places like coffee shops won't have the condiment section. You're going to get your half and sugar put in by the barista. And, things like that are going to be changes that we're going to notice. Maybe you've already noticed them, but that's going to be across the board. So your coffee experience and your buying a hammer experience, they're just going to be different, but it's all in the spirit of safety and health and cleanliness.
Thank you. Amanda, with your members and your office buildings, are you looking at special cleaning routines, changes to handles, touch-free appliances, or things like that? What are the changes you're seeing in the cleaning routines?
So I know during the initial red phase, a lot of our landlords did some of those deep cleans. It was kind of, take advantage of people not being in the property. So I know that a lot of that happened already. And then there's been conversations as we move to yellow with specific, tenants looking for specific cleaning. So yeah, following CDC guidelines, it's great that they put out in the governor's orders of, frequency and what are those high touch surfaces, and really, the elevator buttons, things that you just didn't think of before. And, what do you clean those products with? And, I have a landlord that even mentioned, in conjunction with cleaning, they bought for all their tenants those key things now that you can push things with as opposed to using your fingers. So we're seeing kind of, the cleaning ramping up, to Jason's point of, the frequency is going up, but then people are, getting creative and, using different things to help protect themselves as well while in the space.
Thank you. Petra, anything in particular from the manufacturing side?
Yeah, well, Cleaning is definitely a big issue for manufacturers. And fortunately, there is a lot of guidance, like was mentioned from CDC and OSHA and others. I think cleaning is coming up into kind of 3 categories, and that's that immediate, hand sanitizer, wiping down workstations and so forth, making sure that we're using appropriate cleaners. And there's, again, guidance on that from the CDC, what's allowable. Most companies are doing daily cleaning with their own staff, so after a shift or in between shifts and so forth. And then a type of deep cleaning, I would say, like every couple days with independent third parties using some more sophisticated tools, sprayers, steam systems, foggers, those kinds of things. So yeah, this is definitely a big deal and something that we have to take very seriously.
Thank you. And Petra, you mentioned that a lot of the manufacturers are changing their shift work and staggering their workforce. So can you elaborate at all on that, on sort of, do people expect to see their full complement of people back in the office, or what are some of the strategies they're using to make sure that they are able to observe social distancing?
Yeah, well, like I said, immediately, quite a few of the companies that I was personally engaging with shut down, let's say for a week or so, just to get all their policies and practices in place, then started to bring back production workers. And again, trying to manage that effectively, meet the production demands, but also keep everyone safe and so forth. And that's been the most common thing, I think, has been expanding to multiple shifts if that was possible. So that was step 1. And then the staggering of the shifts was the step 2 that we saw quite a bit of, to prevent people from coming in at the same time. So keeping maybe like an hour in between shifts was a common practice. Designated restrooms, designated break rooms, staggering breaks, those kinds of things. Those are just some of the real common practices that we saw.
Amanda, anything from the office sector on what you're seeing in terms of, shifting people around to make sure that you don't have the same densities initially?
Similar to what Petra mentioned of, rotating people in. So like I said, in the red phase, the buildings were at about 10% occupancy, and the yellow from, the surveys that landlords had sent out, they're expecting 20 to 30% max. But of those people coming back, and when they start to shift more back, they have heard from employers within the properties that it would definitely be staggered. We've seen people that are members of our association that have put out, best practices of, you sit people like on Monday, someone at this desk, and Tuesday it's the person next to them. It's their turn to be at work. So you're not using those same spaces and you're doing those cleanings in between. So definitely a staggered work shift moving forward.
Jason, it's hard to stagger shifts in retail when you're not open 24 hours. What are some of the strategies you're seeing?
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly not staggered shifts as much, but just smaller workforces. With retail slowly reemerging and opening, it's just a different shopping experience right now. So you're going to have limited amounts of customers in the store, and with that being the case, you can have limited amounts of employees in the store. Your in-store experience just isn't the same. So, you're going to see more curbside pickup. I think that will continue. I think that's something people will look for going forward, more so than they may have in the past. Drive-throughs, I think, will become more prevalent as we go forward. Companies that maybe weren't using drive-throughs in the past might be looking for those. But as far as just the current staffing and current workforce, the numbers, it doesn't have to be as much because the customer count just isn't as much.
Thank you. I think, one of the things that we're debating ourselves are a lot of the value of going to the office is being able to gather in groups with your staff and your team and share information and pop into someone's office to have an informal conversation. These are a lot of the things that are going to be very difficult to do under social distancing guidelines. And then there's the disruption of, you've set up your home office and you have all your equipment there. So you're going to drag that into the office 3 days a week, and you're going to work from home 2 days a week. What are you guys thinking in your organizations about bringing people back to the office? And, does staggering really work Maybe in manufacturing may be better, Petra, than in the office space, but for office teams, does it work to stagger the workforce? Jason, you want to jump in first?
Sure. So, I work in an office despite the retail focus. Certainly understand what it's like to be in the office and the importance of it. And I think that the number one thing that we're probably all missing is the culture. Culture is the one thing that's we have a great company culture, and it's been impressive how well our company has managed to stick together and still feel like we're one, even though we're doing this from many different home offices. But I do think that feeling of community and collaboration and culture is so critical to company successes, and we absolutely want to get back to that. And it's going to happen differently. It's definitely going to happen differently for a while. And our plan, so it was when we make our way back to the office at CBRE, we will do it in a staggered approach. There will be people that might be there Monday, Wednesday, Friday, one week, and others that are there Tuesday and Thursday, and vice versa. And we will do it in groupings, and we'll decide whether or not we should be there with our entire team, or if we should split time and have part of our team in the office and part of us out, so that if there were things in the office that we can frankly do better and more efficiently and have a little bit more production done by being where all of our resources are in the building, we'll probably stagger our teams. And the communication that we've had access to, imagine if this had been 10 years ago, or 15 years ago. The way we've been able to adapt immediately has been really impressive, and I think it's been kind of a godsend for us. It's a blessing that we've been able to have the ease of the Zoom calls and the connectivity with our phones and laptops and all that good stuff. But nothing beats the interpersonal communication, in-person communications, and the ability to sit in rooms together and bounce ideas off each other. So, hopefully it's sooner than later, but like probably most companies, we will have staggered approaches, and we're just going to take it safely and one step at a time.
Thank you, and certainly we'll tip our cap to Zoom, the platform for our call today. Now, one of Pittsburgh's own, as they open an R&D center here. Very exciting news, great signal that there is some economic opportunity that exists despite the COVID-19 crisis and pandemic. Amanda, anything you're hearing from your members about staggered returns or strategies for that?
I would say similar to Jason, and even to your point about, it's going to be staggered, but there is that inefficiency of we're already set up at home. And, with the governor's order of if you can work from home, you should continue to work from home. So, employers are taking that seriously. That's why we're really only expecting that, 20 to 30% change of, occupancy. Because there's just some things that, are easier to do in the office space. So people, do need to come in, but and to echo Jason's point of the culture, I think people are, itching to get back and to see their coworkers. And obviously that can't happen overnight, but, ways to facilitate that once we can safely do that. And, working with tenants is, something landlords are excited to do once, that becomes more of an option.
Thank you. Petra, for the manufacturers, a little easier to do staggering or shift work? Any
Yes,
particular concern?
I think Jason, you brought up the company culture issue. That is really that's a real issue in manufacturing and probably in any organization, because you've had a certain number of workers, primarily production workers, that have been going to work every day. We've been trying to keep them as safe as possible, but yet they might still feel like they've been at risk, while other workers have primarily been able to work from home. And so what happens is you start to integrate kind of those two cultures, that work from home culture versus the coming to work everyday culture. That's a real challenge. And it's something, that companies really are thinking about. How do we get back into some type of team building? How do we get everyone back on the same page so we can work together on continuous improvement and problem solving initiatives? So yeah, that's definitely something companies are thinking about. In our own organization, we're also going back very slowly because, again, during the yellow phase, we're still being asked to work from home as much as possible. But at times, we do find the need to go into the office. And one of the things we're doing, which I think I was very pleased. I thought it was a good practice is we have a shared calendar so that if you're going in, you add your name to the calendar and you can see how many people are there at that, going to be there at that time. We have a limit on the number of people that can be there. So, so not only do you see, you know, if we're at the limit, but you can also see how large the group is. So that kind of helps you think, is this something I want to do, go into the office?
Yeah, good stuff. I think for us, you know, we're really not in a hurry to bring our office workers back. So we're going to take our time and make sure that it's safety first. Now, our property managers have been on the job in some capacity throughout the crisis, and they are now back in the office. So they are working full time in a socially distant, spaced way. But for our office workers, you know, we found that our productivity really has not dropped off. So it really is the culture that we worry about more than anything else. How do we get that team to bond and work together when they're remote, even with all the collaborative software and other platforms that you have? So a little bit of a shift here. Employees getting to and from work. Pittsburgh has a big fraction of its workforce that takes public transit normally to get into the office. There are parking lots and garages. There are elevators that everybody has to go up into the high-rise buildings downtown. Any sense on the impact of, you know, COVID-19 on people's transportation choices and perhaps inefficiencies or challenges associated with getting to and from work? Amanda, let's start with you on this one.
Yeah, I definitely think that there are people that, you know, use the public transportation available to them to commute into the city, whether it was the buses or the T. So that's something that employers, again, to your comment of safety first, that they're, you know, making these adjustments that if it doesn't work for that employee to continue their work from home. And additionally, the PDP has also reached out to us and the Port Authority that they're working on a great marketing campaign that is going to include signage essentially that can be put in public spaces, office space lobbies, and, you know, Port Authority, you know, the bus stops that really, you know, tell people to, you know, keep their social distance. It's kind of the 3 P's of it are to prepare, protect, and prevent. So this, you know, community message of, you know, what we need to do moving forward. So it's a great marketing campaign that, you know, they're doing kind of for the city as a whole that should be rolling out soon. So I think that'll help, you know, with the people that are taking it and, you know, seeing the precautions that the Port Authority has put into place themselves will hopefully make, you know, riders feel comfortable moving forward.
Thank you. Jason, anything from your standpoint you're seeing on the whole transportation issue?
You know, I'm seeing what I think what everybody else is seeing. That marketing campaign is going to be, I think, a critical element to it. And the 1 P I would add to that, there was, you know, prepare and prevent and protect kind of thing. But I think patience is that 4th P, because it's going to require patience as everybody adapts to that new way. I'm by no means a public transportation expert, but I think, you know, just seeing the way that we're all living our lives now, you know, you're not going to want to be in that packed bus. So there's probably going to need to be more on that schedule. And with that, we're just going to have to be patient with those processes.
Petra, anything to add?
Honestly, this has not been a topic among the companies we've been talking to.
Okay. Well, I'm going to go off script here for a minute and throw out one question that the panelists haven't seen in advance so far. You know, we've seen some companies in our region respond to this and really respond to some of the challenges and needs. I mean, companies like American Textile making masks, companies like Wiggle Whiskey making hand sanitizer. Any business opportunities that you see in helping companies, landlords, people respond to the crisis? Petra, I'll unfairly start with you on the new question.
No, thanks, Don. No, it's a great question. We see some significant opportunities for manufacturers that are related to supply chains and reshoring of supply chains, companies thinking about how to de-risk their supply chains. We just released a risk mitigation for supply chains ebook that is on our website if anyone would like to take a look at it. It's no cost, it's a free download, but it's all around this idea that you know, in China and similar countries, there are some real issues with manufacturing supply chains. And in some cases, some of those supply chains may actually be broken. And so we think this will create some significant opportunity. And our region has the kinds of companies that can really benefit from that. We're very diverse. We serve a lot of different sectors, you know, transportation, automotive, defense, medical device, and so forth. So we have the types of capacity and capability that can quickly retool and address new opportunities. So I think there is a silver lining, and that opportunity is definitely a silver lining for our community.
Thank you. And I think it's been great the way they responded, but I do want to remind the folks at Wiggle that whiskey is a life critical element as well. So we hope they get back to producing that soon as well. Jason, you actually mentioned a few strategies that retailers you see might be deploying more of for business opportunities, whether it's curbside pickup or drive-throughs. Any other thoughts on things you think are business opportunities?
Yeah, I don't know about producing things like you will see in the industrial world, other than the ones you mentioned where you've had people pivot quickly with the like Wiggle Whiskey with sanitizer, and people like David Allen Clothing who switched from making high-end men's suits to becoming a top producer of face masks. And I've seen that. I've seen face masks being created by other clothing manufacturers. I think Homage was one that recently picked up on that as well. And there are many of those. I think, your crystal ball might be better than mine, Dawn, but I don't know. I don't know what they all will be. There's definitely going to be shifts, and I think it's going to take some time to figure out what is that next move. What are those next things that our clients can be doing? Certainly I mentioned the drive-throughs. I think that's for sure. I think curbside pickup for things, curbside pickup was pretty much a food situation. You'd stop and, get your pizza or, but that's going to be different. It's going to be different for, one of our properties is the Galleria in Mount Lebanon. And we have retailers that aren't frankly able to be open to the public yet. But these people want, they're entrepreneurs. They want to be selling things. So they are, they're doing web-based sales and meeting people on the curb. So we have tenants that are doing that. And hopefully those types of things don't have to last for long. Hopefully we can get people back in the buildings and just be, cautious consumers so we can kind of get back to normal.
Thank you. Amanda, anything you'd like to add on this topic?
I would just say from our sector, it's great to hear Petra's group kind of pivoting and making those items because they're feeling the hurt in the supply chain from tenants that are looking for hand sanitizer or wipes. So, that's been a big topic with our members of where do I get these items for my employees? So, and Jason's tenants making those masks. So our sector is probably the people trying to snatch up those items. So, it's great to see that they're being made locally and can be bought by us to put into place.
Great, thank you. I'll remind our attendees for today's webinar that there is a Q&A button on the bottom of your screen where you can submit questions for our panelists. We have received a couple of those, and I'm going to direct some of those to the panelists now. The first question is, are there submarkets that have been more impacted by this crisis in downtown Oakland, the suburban communities or the outlying counties? Any thoughts on that from the panelists? Jason, what are you seeing?
Yeah, sure. So the question is absolutely are the submarkets that have been impacted. When using Amanda's stat, if our buildings are 10% full downtown, 90% of people aren't downtown to shop or downtown to. They're not getting on the bus, they're not buying a sandwich, they're not buying a cup of coffee. And, that is absolutely impacting in so many ways. If you're not selling goods, it impacts your ability to pay rent. And if you're not, it's a challenging environment in every submarket, but the submarkets that count on that daytime population are the ones that I think are probably most impacted. The ones, that probably have not been impacted as much, and this might not be a fair comment, but if you go to Home Depot or Lowe's, I think there's a lot of people that are at working from home that might also be working in their garden during the day. So there are things that where some retailers aren't impacted, but overall, I mean, everybody's impacted. But where the workforce is, the daytime population, I think that's probably where it's hit the hardest.
Amanda and Petra, anything to add there? Amanda, you want to jump in?
I would just, Jason's exact point, that means 90% of the people aren't downtown. It has been great though to see, some restaurants went from selling like meals to go to actual, it's hard to get like produce and meat. And so, they started kind of selling those like wholesale in a sense where you could, buy those. So that was the PDP also did a gift card give back program, which I think they're still doing, where if you purchased a gift card for certain restaurants in retailers downtown, then it was matched and you got I think 25% of what it was. So it's been great to see the kind of community rally, but for sure, those lunch spots, no one's having lunch downtown right now, so it's tough for those retailers.
Petra,
Yeah.
any impacts on different markets?
Well, when we think of markets in our world, we think more about industrial sectors versus, geographic sectors. And certainly those companies that have been in the automotive supply chain or that have business in the automotive supply chain, that's essentially gone to zero. So that's, they're waiting now to see what happens with the automotive sector as Ford and GM think about ramping back up and so forth. Aerospace has been very difficult. And then the energy market, which really isn't as related to COVID as it is just to the overall world market conditions for energy. So again, as I mentioned, the good news is that most manufacturers are diversified. So they're not, solely dedicated, let's say, just to the automotive market. So a lot of them are just kind of waiting to see, what happens now as we get back into this sort of recovery. And then, as I mentioned earlier, where are the new opportunities? Where can they pivot, from one market to another to secure that new business?
Great, thanks. And here's a great question. I'm not sure it really is in the wheelhouse of all our panelists, but we are such an education town. How is this going to impact the return of students to either K through 12 or in particular our universities who draw so many people into town every year? Any thoughts on how the impact of this is going to be on student returns?
Well, Dawn, I can make a comment. It's not directly a response to that question about returning students, but one issue that's definitely come to our attention is that many of our region students, their internships and co-op experiences have been canceled or rescinded. And that's really important for students to get that type of work experience. And I think it's important for our community to give them that kind of work experience to help more students stay in the region, because after all, we need them. We need the engineers and the professionals and so forth. So one of the things we're working on is connecting groups of students to manufacturers to help with business continuity planning and implementing specific initiatives related to business continuity planning. And ideally, it's not an internship, it's still a work-based experience that students can use, to fulfill their graduation requirements and also to enhance their resume. And at the same time, it gives manufacturers that type of exposure to the region students for their talent pipeline.
Thank you. Jason or Amanda, any thoughts on this? If not, we can move on, but I'll give you the opportunity.
Sure. I'll just the only comment I'd make, I don't really have a direct comment for that question either, but I can tell you that I need school to open back up in the fall. the kids, I've never appreciated teachers more. So hopefully the impact can be figured out so that we can get our kids back where they belong in the school, so they can, the education from home just isn't the same.
I would just say too that we talked about, work culture, and I think that we're seeing that young kids are, missing their friends, and if anything, how often do you hear the college experience? So I think these are big conversations that are still happening of, how can we give people a safe in-person option or a combined option? So I know Jason's not alone of of needing a little bit of a reprieve if he's going to still be working at home. So.
I even have a friend who was chased out of his home office by his Christmas puppy, who just wouldn't leave him alone. And so many challenges, lots of people looking to get back, but it does impact our experience, certainly. You know, I think a great question came in from Bud Leeper. Are companies that you know of, or any of them providing funds to employees to establish home offices? You know, those who didn't work from home prior to this, really now being expected to work from home, have had to establish home offices in many cases. You know of any examples of people, you know, funding this? I know we've actually increased our expense allowance for employees to set up some home office equipment and really to get established so they can be productive there. Are you hearing any specific examples or that other companies are doing? Petra?
Yeah, I would think, you know, just about every manufacturer that has remote work, employees working remotely has provided them with the tools to be able to do that. And again, like you said, equipment, the technology support that is needed. That whole digital infrastructure is a very, very important part of you know, the success of any business really, but in particular a manufacturing company. And those companies that were better prepared, you know, that had that in place, certainly have fared much better than those that had to scramble, you know, to address the current crisis. And I think that's one of the things for the future that we're really encouraging companies is to take a look at that digital infrastructure and make sure that is ready and in place for a future stay-at-home order if that should come.
Thank you. Amanda, any examples that you've heard of?
I do know that not of specific examples, but like to Petra's point that, you know, they've provided what people needed to do to work from home if they didn't have that opportunity. I do know locally a lot of companies up their, you know, bandwidth and, you know, internet capabilities. So that was a big one. So people could, you know, functionally work at home. And then I've heard, so BOMA is international and we have a weekly call with people with my position and hearing that, you know, people have been set up with the right chairs or, you know, monitors if needed. So it's definitely happening to kind of fit this new normal at your dining room table or home office.
Jason, hard to work from home for retail clients, but any CBRE or other insights on this, examples that people are doing?
You know, our company's been supportive with our needs, and you know, I have lots of examples, none which I probably should name, of our clients and our office clients that have absolutely taken care of their folks with whether it's screens or just, you know, creating the necessary opportunities for them to be productive at home. So it's the short answer to that gentleman's question is absolutely, you know, companies are taking care of their people to make sure that they remain productive.
Great. So shifting gears a little bit here, particularly for Amanda and Jason and maybe there's a question that came in. You know, how do you see landlords working with their tenants on lease negotiations or alterations? What are the implications of this for the whole landlord-tenant relationship? And Amanda, I'll let you start on the office side, and then Jason, you can comment on retail and more broadly.
Yeah, I would say that that's definitely a specific tenant to landlord conversation. You know, as this whole conversation has highlighted that this has hit different segments and markets differently. So, you know, our landlords are having those conversations as necessary, you know, with their tenants.
Jason, what are you seeing?
Amanda's answer is about as broad as I want to be too, I think. You know, it's absolutely a topic of discussion, you know, and it has been for 10 or 11 weeks now. You know, what I think that the best part of all of this is that we've seen people truly, you know, we've seen kind of the hashtags of we're all in this together. And I think we've seen the best of both sides of our clients in that we're all in this together. And it's, you know, the situations people were in are really nobody's fault. So, you know, people are working together. The specifics of people's ability to modify deals is really case by case, but the conversations are happening and many of them are positive.
Yeah, and I know we know from our own experience, both as a tenant and a landlord, you know, we're looking at the increased costs that are involved in extra cleaning, of changing out fixtures to no touch, to HEPA filters in the air systems, implementing technologies. Carnegie Robotics, one of the great success stories in our region, had an automated floor cleaning machine, and now they've added a UV sanitation component to that the airport is actually the first airport in the world to have this feature to do extra cleaning. But all these extra cleaning and extra fixtures and other new filtration, they cost money. And so we're trying to figure out with our tenants how we meet their needs and their employees' needs and do so in an economic framework that both parties can survive. And there's going to be a lot of issues, a lot of back and forth, and a lot of discussions between tenants and landlords around this. Here's a different kind of take. We mentioned and we talked about public transportation. There's a story in the New York Times today about companies looking to move locations from Manhattan to the suburbs, so their employees aren't as dependent on public transit and aren't in the same kind of dense environment. Do you see anything happening like that in our region? You're crystal balling here. Are folks going to be looking for less dense locations or less public transit dependent locations as a response to this? Any thoughts on that, Petra? Have you heard any talk about this?
No, this has not been a trend that that's been on our radar or discussions. No. I mean, as you know, it's very difficult to move a manufacturing facility. So the ones that are here and established, it's possible, but I'm not sure about that. Perhaps where we may see some change is as companies think about our region and where they might want to locate. Perhaps they'll want to consider some more of the suburban locations.
Jason, retail, go where the people are, but any thoughts on people changing their location strategies?
I don't know. I think it's too soon to tell. My opinion of it and conversations I've had is people like what they were living. So I think if we can get back to that would be ideal. But I'd be making up an answer, and I don't want to do that. I just don't know.
Amanda, any thoughts on the office side or from BOMA?
I would say the same thing as Jason. I think people missed, what they were doing. And then I'm in no way a public transportation expert, but what kind of used to be, I wish we had different public transportation in Pittsburgh. In one way, might have been a saving grace that we had less people so close to each other in a public space that was being used. So, for us, we're probably a city that could be like least impacted by this, but I'm sure if you live in New York City, you're rethinking what the subway ride means to you today.
Great, thanks. Another question we have had come in, any special concerns for dealing with people with disabilities post-COVID? Any special plans or considerations that you've heard of that people are taking into account for wheelchair access and other things when you're trying to limit, common touch and density and other kinds of things? Anybody have any examples or thoughts on that? Petra, have you heard anything? Your folks?
No, this has not been a topic of discussion either.
Jason, anything on the retail side that relates to this?
Retail properties it's been pretty strictly regulated to be ADA compliant for many years. So, I'm sure there are ways that will have to be slightly improved, but most retail facilities and retail operations are already pretty well put together for ADA requirements.
Amanda, anything you'd like to add there?
I would say the same thing as Jason, that, ADA is definitely not new to the commercial real estate space, but just, making sure if you hand sanitizer stations that they're at the correct height, for people that are blind, if they're doing Braille, that, they have an opportunity if they're going to be touching things to, have those hand sanitizer stations close by. So again, I think the bones, the framework was in place, and just building on that, moving forward with the new requirements.
Well, I've seen Patty reappear, so I think that means we're coming to the end of our panel discussion. I'd like to really thank my panelists for some really great answers and some great insight. Hopefully a helpful conversation. I know a number of your organizations have put out some best practice guidelines documents, and so I would encourage people to go to your websites and check those out. I know AIA has also put out a pretty exhaustive set of documents about reopening business spaces. So there's some resources out there for folks. And with that, I will turn it back over to Patty.
Thank you, Dawn. Great, incredible information. Very much appreciate it. I was one of those who found my way to a women's clothing store on Saturday, went into the dressing room, tried it on, made significant purchases, a lot of which I don't even need, but when there's a will, there's a way. Okay, so I have a lot of thank yous to extend. First, to all those who participated and for their thoughtful questions. To, once again, to our panelists, to Amanda Schaub from BOMA Pittsburgh, Petra Mitchell from Catalyst Connection, Jason Cannon from CBRE, and a big thank you to Dawn Smith, our moderator. Also, thank yous to our sponsors, Peoples, Giant Eagle, Highmark Health, and UPMC Health Plan. Without your support, this programming wouldn't be available. And just a couple cleanup notes. Remember that the Allegheny Conference has a COVID response website, including the Ready Pittsburgh resource I mentioned earlier, created to support our region in moving forward, reopening safely, and staying open sustainably. You can find a link to it in red at the top of the AlleghenyConference.org website. Please be on the lookout for invitations to join upcoming installments of the Allegheny Conference Response and Recovery webinar series. And thank you. I hope you've had a good day and wish everybody a terrific Memorial Day weekend.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Take care, everybody. Thank you.